Welcome to today's session, session 2 of 4 on EstimatorXpress on the group training. This session we will be covering in Module 2 the specifications, what specifications are suitable for which type of job, how to change resources and their usage factors within a specification, how to adjust your default profit markups and inflation rates, and at the end, for those that still use a legacy format, how to create and edit groups of workbooks. And you'll see now that I have my dashboard in front of me. In session 1, we covered the editing of, material prices, labor prices, and adjusting the difference between our price book price and what you may be paying, and how to manage those adjustments en masse and individually, and also creating individual resources. What we can do now is go into our library again. I'm going to expand that there. You can also click on the library button to preview all that's important within the library, as you can see it by scrolling down. And we're going to take a couple of these items that we've been looking at and use them in a kind of test specification and some of the scenarios that we may be using them in. Now for this, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click on the specifications header on the left here. The reason being is that this will take me to look at the overarching specifications page. So it has all the specifications listed that I have on the left, but it also gives me some other options. While these are available on the right click mouse option, it's good to view these there so you can see that you have open and copy there as well. And since these are HBXL specifications that come with the software, they can't be deleted, but any that you've created yourself, you can delete if you find that they're superfluous or old, or you just want to create a new one. So to go through the specifications themselves, just so we can see what differences lay between them, I'm going to go through from, say, the newest build and then go to the timber frame stuff. So new build specifications, say, follow the latest building regulations, and it's based on the government's kind of elemental recipe for making sure that everything is up to standard. The new build spec has the fastest build speeds and defaults to larger plant. So that'd be things like JCB, if you leave items as default within there. The extension specification is very much like the new build specification, but will focus more on a slower build speed to allow for the difficulty of, say, moving materials and plant around to the rear of a building with less access, as well as smaller plant themselves, so using skips and mini diggers as its defaults. The renovation specification, again, is like the extension specification, but with even longer build times to account for the difficulty there. And then the same is reflected on the new build for the site fabricated timber frame and the new build timber frame. The big difference between the new build site fabricated and the timber frame specification themselves is that the site fabricated accounts for items being built on site. So when you use that specification and it removes the internal leaf of the cavity walls and such, it won't be touching or removing anything from, say, flooring or the roof tools, because it still presumes that you're going to be building the roof on site, either by hand or by truss, say cut or truss. Whereas the new build timber frame specification and such will also be removing the internal leaf of walls, but will also set the certain floor and roof items as included in the timber frame, as those items will also be part of the timber frame kit that's been purchased in, and you're just going to be using, say, the roofing and the wall tools just for the labor or the external covering of those items themselves. So that is the major difference there. So the standard timber frame kit probably more suitable again for kits and also things like SIPS panels, where the roof and floors and everything else comes as parts of the kit. So that is the general gist of how the differences is kind of measure up on all of those specifications. Do you have a question about the Scottish building regulations? We do go for the standard English regulations. So if you find that there's something that is below reg on the spec, you can adjust that to suit what you require, though they should be high enough to cover that by default anyway, as leeway given within the specification. So it's not barely scraping by, it's got some movement in there. So it should be okay, but you can always look through the specifications to confirm. In the case of certain thicknesses or installations used in the timber frame kits themselves, those will be relying on the actual calculators, because the calculators aren't controlled by the specification for the timber frame. These specifications best take everything that would be replaced by the timber frame and set them as not required and such within the specification, like inner leaves and such. For our session today, what we're going to do is copy one of these specifications. So we can take the spec and tweak it for our own use, for our own preferred way of working. Now, all the specs by default can be adjusted, and you can adjust the master specifications. And if you are working in the software frequently and there's always one thing you want to change or have to change, you can make that change within the main spec that it starts off with. For good point of that, when you start a template job for a new build, it will look for a new build spec. If you start a template job for an extension, it will look at the extension specification by default. Now you can change that within the job afterwards. It's just one of those convenience factors. So what I'd like everyone to do now is go to the extension specification and click copy. The copy will now give us the option to give it a new name. So I'm going to call this one training spec. Okay, nothing overly original on this one, just something easy to identify. I'm going to click OK. So after a few moments, your specification will open for you to give it a good gander, have a good look at. So first off, we're going to go through some theory on the specifications. As you can see, it's quite large, as the scroll bar, as you'll see there, it's quite hefty. So on the left, we will have tasks. These tasks could be a material choice, a labor task, such as fitting, or a plant task, such as digging out. There'll also be the occasional sundry or subcontractor tasks thrown in there as well. But when you're looking at the section, much like the calculators you encounter later on, when you are looking at a section of the specification, you'll start off with the materials, then the labor, then the plant, and anything else below it for that section. With this as well, you'll see that the very first section we get to look at is section cavity wall specification and general walling, which means this bit here will be affecting brick and block cavity wall, cavity block wall, stone and block walls, anything that basically goes, I need a trench foundation for a cavity wall or something along those lines. Is a cavity wall, anything that's similar will be coming here for that information. And then it'll take that information and put it into the calculator that's using. Certain items will be overridden by mini specs, which we can go into later on. That being the plasterboards in some cases, the bricks for the majority part in the roofing section, that'd be the tiles. But everything else will be the kind of default listed item here. We can also just close these down just so we can move on to the next section. Let's have a peruse as well. So stone faced there has a much smaller section to look at for the stone face because it shares everything with the general walling section. This is just looking at the stone facing that's going to be used each time. If I expand that back up again, you can also use the find tool. Now find is brought up by using a Windows shortcut, and that's holding the control key. So click in here so the screen's active, hold the control key and press the letter F. And it brings up this box here. I'll close it and I'll do it again. So this is a kind of a filter box. It's not a search. It won't find the nearest thing to what you're typing. It will find items with the explicit term that, say, was used for that. So, well, give me a second. As example, if I was to search for tiles, enter, it'll go through and just pick out anything that has referring to tiles within my specification. Much of this is covered by a mini spec as well, but it allows us to kind of go through and see, okay, where do tiles appear? And we can see all the sections where they might be involved. I can clear that filter. I can type block, hit enter, and I can see everywhere that a block appears. And I can even then just click on the type to filter by down. If you haven't got that search bar, like I say, it's brought up by using the Control F combo. So I'll clear the filter and close that. When you're clicked in this area here, if you hold the Control key on your keyboard, which should be the very bottom left-hand key, unless it's in Lenovo and it's the one to the right of it, the function key, it should just say CTRL. Usually, if you hold that and then press the letter F, it's the shortcut for find in Windows. You can bring up the find box in most places, even on websites. If you've got a large website you need to read or someone sent you, you can use that shortcut to search for a specific word or instances of word. Works in Word as well. Anything that has anything you want to find. But it's just a quick way of filtering through. Another way of filtering this section is to generally often filter by types, which we can use later on, possibly in the calculators. Now, what we're going to do here, and I would like everyone to be at the top at the start of the section here, is I'm going to change the cavity wall insulation. Because the cavity wall insulation currently says cavity wall insulation 100 by 455 by 120 millimeter, 10 sheets at 5.46 meters square. We're going to change that to our sheep's wool that we created on Tuesday. So then we can use that easily identifiable resource and see how it feeds through to subsequent workbooks and calculators when we do that on the next session. So to change this, I just need to make sure that the section I want to change is there. And I can go to change resource, and then I can find my sheep's wool insulation. Now, those who were here on Tuesday may remember that I looked at a section for favorite merchants. And that allowed me to look at a type of insulation or type of material and swap it wholesale for another. And in many cases, that could be quite useful, especially if across all of your specifications, you want to change that resource to something else. In other instances, such as looking at this training specification, you may be having a look at creating a spec for the off chance, like the odd jobs that you do for someone in particular. You may have an architect that always, say, uses a certain type of material, and you just go, okay, I'll just change the spec so it always is their one. So what we're going to do here with that now is with the say change resource up, I'm just going to find the sheep's wool. Highlight that sheep's wool. You should all have that in your post book from last time, and click select resource. Now with that, the options on screen are just a little bit of information. So item used for, the resource being used, item cost, and usage factor. Now the usage factor generally doesn't make much sense for the most part. 0.183 estimate rate per how much is costing per meter square. To make that make much more sense, we can click on the calculator. And then we get a little conversion tool that says I use 1 sheep's wool for so many meters square of cavity insulation. We can change that to say the 6.2 that's in the description. The information is right there. And for those who are here on Tuesday, you may remember me saying the importance of having that bit of information in the resource that you're creating, so that when you come to use that resource, you don't have to go researching it, looking elsewhere, or trying to remember how big that pack is. It's there, ready to go. When we're happy with what we've typed, just click OK. You don't need to change the build phase because it's going in at the same time as everything else, what it was before. It's just a straight swap. And we can click OK. Now that specification is saved with that new resource. If my section has something different at the top, it may very well be because I've clicked the type to filter by something else by sheer accident. What you can do, again, you can right click in one of the topic boxes at the top and click reset layout, and it puts everything back to the way it should be by default. So right click in one of the column headers with the description in or title and hit reset layout, and it puts it back to its default value, how it orders things. Hopefully that makes everything back to looking familiar again. Okay, so when we change a resource like this, it also means that the fitting speed has changed. So we need to scroll down a little bit now, and we are going to have to look for the fitting or using of that resource. So past the say building sands, plasterboards and such, there we start getting to the labour section. So we've got excavate trench, lay planking and strutting. So you go further down, we've got fixed cavity insulation. So in this case, again, we're not going to click change resource because it's still going to be the same group of people fitting the resource. Instead, we're going to go straight to the edit resource button, which you can click up here, or you can right click and go edit resource. This time it takes us straight to the edit resource box. Well, our fixed cavity insulation to bricklayers and mate costs £75 per hour, usage factor 0.036. Once again, all we need to do is click on the calculator, and we can then change how fast they work. So it takes 1 hour to do 27.77778 of fixed cavity insulation, meter square of fixed cavity insulation. For the cavity the packs there that are going in originally, that might seem quite reasonable. They're easy to fix, they're designed for that task, but the sheep's wool requires a bit more manhandling, fixing, pinning as you roll it out and get it in place. So we could say that it takes 1 hour to do 15 meters square of fixed cavity insulation because it's much more of a bother. By doing this now, my usage factor has changed. I can click OK. My estimated rate of fitting has gone up to £5 per meter square. It's gone up. It's going to cost more to do. and click OK, and that's now done. So next time that resource is used, your material costs are going to go down, but your labor costs will go up. So to reiterate, when you want to change the resource, you find the item you want to change, click on Change Resource, find the resource you want to change it to, and select that. And again, as mentioned last time, whenever you come across a item or something you need to change to that doesn't exist already, click New Resource and it'll add it to your software. So I'm going to select that sheep's wool there. On the Edit Resource screen, the key thing to remember is to click the calculator and change it to match the description. And that's done. And the second one to do is to make sure that we then adjust the labor to suit. I'm just going to go through this again for you so you can see that there. Okay, so your question. Then we can edit that resource. Again, you can click on the item, right click and go edit resource, or use the button in the ribbon. And with that, we can then change the speed of how fast that is being done. So it's a case of just having a look at the task being done, and if you know it's going to take longer, then you can adjust that by however you feel what your professional experience would dictate. Or it might be something you might have a resource for a book to say how fast someone's going to be doing that task. You've got a rates book to give you an indication. But at the end of the day, by popping this in here, the software then can start doing the maths whenever it encounters this item. Click OK again, and that task is now done. Okay, so give everyone a chance to catch up there a second. I'm going to take a swig of my drink. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to take a look at in here is very similar to that fixing cavity wall installation. And it's for the cases where you have a possibly like something like fireboard might need to be required for a garage ceiling or something. You can something like that would probably be best to be doing in a calculator, but since the calculator screen will look the same as this, if you're looking at the back end of it, or if you use, it's much simpler if you're using the wizard, which we will be doing in session 3, is to adjust the materials used for something, as well as changing the resource. For ease, instead of going to a ceiling or something like that, I'm just going to change the plasterboard that is contained within the walling section. So I'm just going to go to plastering to inner block walls. Okay, so it's just a couple of little scroll clicks down from the top. And to kind of reiterate that section we've gone through before, you can follow along this bit, or you can wait for me to do the next, the second half of this. I'm going to go to the change resource. And I'm just going to go straight to a fire protected plasterboard. Just a couple of scrolls up, select that one. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to click the calculator, and I can see that that fireboard is one for 2.8 meters square, plastering in a block wall. Okay, now which it matches the previous board size, which was exactly the same size. So for the most part, swapping something like a plasterboard from like a 9mm to 12.5mm, or back and forth, or when you're doing the same for the sheet materials like ply and such, you don't have to change usage factor. Whenever you're changing a resource as like for like, it generally matches. But there are cases where, if in the case of the fireboard here, you might have to double that up, and you can't go adding, well you can, but it's more difficult to go adding extra resources into the calculator when you can quite easily manipulate or change a single figure that will do everything for you. So all I need to do, say if I'm doubling up this fireboard, is just type 2 in the I use 2 per 2.8. I don't have to do the maths on the one below to give a double area. I just say I use 2 sheets. Bingo, done. Now I've doubled up the material. And that logic can be applied anywhere where there's an area that you need to cover. You can literally just double the amount of material you want. An example of that is in timber frame panels. As I was saying about just now, our timber frame panel has a sheet of ply on the external side. Some people need a sheet of ply on both sides. To which I say, go into the sheet of ply and say I use 2 for every meters, so many meters square. And then you've got enough ply for both sides. Do the same for the fixings and the labor, and that's it. Effectively, you just double those options, and you have no more concerns about if you've got enough material or time to do it. So knowing that you can come into this section, or whenever you see that edit resource as a button, be it in the resources wizard of a calculator, or looking at the spec, or looking at the resource directly within the calculator, you can use that to change a figure to match whatever you want. Okay. And to reiterate again, because I've changed the material in this case, or in this case I've just doubled its usage, I'm not going to go to the extent of changing the fixings, but I can go to the apply plastering to walls. I can go to edit resource, click on the calculator, and says it takes 1.5 hours. It's not going to be double the amount of time, it's just going to be 50% extra the amount of time. Click OK, and click OK again. So I'm going to give you a second to catch up with that if you want to follow along. Okay, so hopefully everyone is happy with that. If you've got, again, questions, pop them in the question box. If you need something reiterated, I'm happy to go through that again. Now, the next section I'm going to have a little look through in here are the mini specs. Now, you can get access to the mini specs for within this section of specifications. You can do it from within a job as well and edit the ones in the software. Now, mini specifications are the ability to basically hot swap the resources you're using in an estimate. You can go from 70 pence bricks to 80 pence bricks. You can go from pan tile to plain tile to slate. There's a huge range of guttering that you can use. Lots of plastering options you can apply to plasterboard in the calculators. You can change the different floorboards being used. It goes for what tongue groove by default. You can change that to ply or chipboard. So it gives you the ability to mass change things. It's also got one of the easiest old school tricks in the software of just setting everything that's relevant to decorating as not required. There is now a box in the templates to do that for you. So I'm going to go to the button at the top here, which is Create Edit Mini Spec Selection Options. It will bring up a box that gives a couple of drop-down boxes, Mini Spec and Mini Spec Option. The Mini Spec is the type of Mini Spec that I want to use or want to edit. So external wall brickwork mini specs, roof tiling mini specs, roof guttering mini specs. For simplicities, I'm going to go to the external wall brickwork mini specs. There's a shorter list one. Afterwards, I'm going to show you some of the longer ones. With the mini spec options, it's the ones that you'll see within the software when you're selecting for that section. So you'll see the facing brick for extension and renovation, facing brick for new build with the higher build speeds and such. I'm going to go to one of these now so you can see the fastest build speed. And as mentioned in session 1, when we was looking at the bricks in the price book, as the bricks are all done as incremental say price brackets, so 80, 85, 90, they're all available in the mini specs ready to go, just to quick pick from. As you can see here, this is saying section cavity wall specification and journal warning specification. So this is the section behind that it will be replacing items in. Now, I'm not going to go much in the way of editing in the mini specs. This is just more so you can see how they work, and what they do, and what kind of things they change. But also the relevance they have and what you're choosing. Because it's more than applicable to choose a new build mini spec for tiling or brickwork when doing an extension, if it's easy to do. And you can quite happily pick a extension mini spec when doing a new build if you want to slow everything down. So in here I've got my facing bricks, which is kind of on the point for how fast you're going. But if I go lay bricks below splash course and lay bricks above DPC less openings, I've got a usage factor of 0.5. Makes no sense at first glance, so you can click edit resource. And you'll see here that with my usage factors, if I click on the calculator, it takes 1 hour to do 2 meters square. So that 0.5 is basically half an hour per meter square. For our logic. I'm going to close that. I'm going to go to the extension of elevation one. I'm going to click on the bricks below DPC less openings. I'm going to click on the edit resource on the calculator, and there we have a 1.66667 meter square. So you can see how the speed has been slowed down to allow for that extra difficulty of moving materials and loading out and such. So if you want to have a slower bricklayer speed, use the extension spec. And for reference sake as well, if I go to new build reclaimed brick, we have 1.515. And for reclaimed brick for extension elevation, again as well. So it's much slower speeds for those because it's considering the checking of the bricks, making sure that they are in good condition because they are reclaimed and such. Now that's a simple section for mini specs. If I go to the roof tiling and choose, let's say, plain tile, a few more options in here that's been considered on the mini spec. So we've got the tiles, the nails, the ridge tiles being used, even the batten that's going to be used for a plain tile, as well as also the all the eaves and top tiles that's going to be involved. If I swap that over to a pan tile, you'll see that the items such as eaves, top tiles, and verges are set as not required. So by choosing that one, you don't have to go through and making sure that you're changing the number of tiles for eave, verge, and such, because the material in the background is going to be non-existent. So it makes things nice and quick when you're going through the calculators, because everything that is relevant is there, everything that's not relevant has been removed. Just to have a quick look at some of the others as well, because we've got the flat roof waterproofing. As you can see there with the tortrons, we have a little difference between the basic tortron, basically felt primer and a cap sheet, an underlay, and then the premium with the premium tortrons and underlays and such. You can see this one's even larger section, and there's more to consider when doing the flat roof. And then the biggest one of all, and I don't suggest you open this one up directly if you've got a slower machine, decoration. If I go to the no decoration mini spec, as you can see, everything is set as not required. You shouldn't need to use this one all the time because there's a tick box for it within the templates. But as you can see, it will basically look at every single resource that has decoration applied to it and say not required. So even if you have dimensions and a yes box saying yes, this wall is getting plastered and then it's getting decorated and the skirting is going to get primed and such, it's just going to try and times by 0 because there's absolutely diddly squat for it to work with. So before I move on to the next section, because I'm going to have a little demonstration of creating mini spec. I'm going to go to roof tiling. I go for a pan tile. It's going to show you the add new. While I'm doing this, if you want to think of any questions or you might have about the mini specs, we'll make that question box bigger so I can see all of them. So when would you use a mini spec? So what you would use a mini spec generally at the beginning of the job. If you have the prompt to do the wizard when creating a job, so you can choose it there. If not, when you open the job, within the first couple of scrolls, there's a section saying what the mini specs are. That basically shows them within the job. And you can click on the Edit Spec in mini Specs button to bring up the drop-down boxes. That will be looking like this for each section. In there, you just choose the type of materials or the group of type of materials. So you can say, oh, this job's going to be using pan tile, so I'll use the pan tile mini spec. If you've left it as a plain tile mini spec, then your roof's not going to be estimating with the correct materials. And you're getting there and you think you have to change everything. But the mini spec will set the groundwork for everything that follows. So if you've set a mini spec at the beginning for 80 pence brick, pan tile, aluminium guttering, high spec torchon or GRP, every time you use a calculator that needs a resource from that list in the specification, that's the resources it will be using. So it saves having to kind of customize the materials in each job, because you might be doing extension A and extension B, one's got GRP, one's got single ply. Instead of having to go into the roofing calculator and change the resources being used, you can just go, oh, the mini spec for this job is this one, because that's what the architect said on the plans. And then when you get to doing the flat roof, bingo, everything is ready for you to use. You just need to drop the dimensions in and make sure things are the right length. Now, some more in-depth uses of the mini specs as well. Plastering ones being a good example, which we could possibly look at in section 3, in that you can actually change the mini spec or the specification for the calculator that is in use for the bit you're using. So you could be doing plastering to a bathroom and change the plasterboard for that room or the plasterboard for that section you're doing there. So you can go on an individual basis. Basically, that's one of the more advanced user features, but it's there and it's enabled by being able to do a quick mass swap of resources on the fly, saving time. These are actually many things that have come through from years of user requests and our own estimating service, as we can see what areas need streamlining or tools that will make tasks that tend to be repeated or have a lot of variation between designers or architects that builders come across, that we can then kind of make faster while still maintaining the accuracy of all the other materials that would support that task. If you ever do feel that you want to create your own mini spec instead of editing the ones that are already here, you can copy an existing mini spec and make changes in there so you can add it to the library. Bricks being an example where you add in an increment of brick at, say, 87 pence, or a different type of brick. Some people changed the name of the reclaimed brick to yellow stock after adding that resource into the price book. The tiling one, some people have gone into the slate one and changed the slate from the default smaller, say medium-sized slates to the small slates or larger Welsh slate. So it's a little tool that you can use to kind of speed things up for how you often work, or between things you often work with. I'm just going to cancel out of that now and move on to the next section. Mini specs are one of those areas that tend to not dive in too deeply on getting started, generally because there's quite a lot of stuff to it. And I don't want to go everyone focusing on that one when it's just a useful tool to the side above whatever understanding what the main spec section does. So the next task I'm going to go into is changing default overheads and profits. Okay. So on the left-hand side, you should see overhead and profit. Give that a click for me, please. It's a smaller section, but it makes a big impact in the long run. You'll see that we have the overhead and profit split into two columns, broken down by the material, labor, plant, subcontract, and sundry. Then next to it, the total markup, just so you can do the maths, and then an inflation rate section, currently set at 5% over an inflation delay of 12 weeks. These are the software defaults, and it is recommended that you have a little gander at this because everyone's total markup on jobs is different. If you speak to our friends at Petty Business Group, they will fully encourage you to make sure that your markup is 30%, if not more, to know your worth. But the main thing is that depending on your business size, the one that you want to be looking at is overhead. Profit is something that you want to be making. 15% should be the minimum what you're making on a job. Overhead shouldn't be considered as something you're making on a job. It's the cost of running the rest of your business while the job is ongoing. Depending on the size of your business, be it a small business or medium, and we have large businesses on the books as well, those overheads can increase. They could be a large chunk of the estimate. They cover everything from, say, your van insurance. If you're not using the fuel calculators within the estimates, then you're paying for your fuel out of your overhead. Your phone rental, your line rental for your internet that you're using right now to view this, all of that comes out of your overhead. If it's not coming out of your overhead, it's coming out of your pocket. It's also considering things that if you're employing a member of staff to sit in the office to answer the phones or do the estimating for you, where everyone else is on site getting their work costed for by the estimates, then you need to consider that as well. So that's basically the overhead in it. Sometimes you might sit down with your accountant and go through those items to figure out what you kind of need to be going for. But we start off with 15% for that reason purely. Same again for the profit. With that, it's broken down so you can charge more profit on your materials. We can put more overhead on the materials to protect you a bit more in the long run. If you just want to have a flat rate in there, increase to cover you, though we can cover that in the inflation rates in this moment. And same again for the labor. You might feel that you're making much more, you want to charge more on the labor for your profit. And then to add to that as well, the subcontractor, 15%. I will highlight subcontractor because one of the questions that comes up frequently, and as a piece of terminology, is about PC sums or provisional sums or anything like that when it comes to those, and they see the PC sums or provisional sums button within the software. That does not add profit or markup. The value that goes in there will have VAT applied, and that is it, because it will be an item that the customer knows the value of, so it goes into that section. If you want to add something into the software and the customer does not know the value of that item, drop it into the subcontractor section. As a subcontract price, it could be supply and fit, or to provide this and this as a general subcontract cost. Reason being, it will then have that markup applied. Okay, so that was one to remember, so that make sure you are making your profit and markups and overheads on those items. Bear me 1 second. So the last part of this to look at is inflation rates. Now, inflation tool within the software pops up in a couple of places. It pops up in some reports. It pops up in the quote when you tick a button. And what that will do is it will look at the items within your price book. It will look at the dates of those items. When everything in the price book gets updated, by the way, when you do a price book download, everything gets updated, so it's that date, so when you've last checked. And it will start an internal counter from when that date is that you've set here. So delay before inflating costs, 12 weeks. So if you've got a job that is over within 4 weeks and you start it within 3, the inflation won't go up. But if you have a job that you're starting more than 12 weeks away, or is overlapping that 12-week marker, anything after that initial period will have that 5% by default applied. It'll be increased by 5% and then applied to the job. So when you're looking at the costs of it in your report or your quote, everything after a certain date will be increased appropriately. Now, it's more of a protection because after the 12 weeks, if there's been a 5% materials increase on average, then at least you have the quote stating so, because the materials ordered towards the end of the job on a longer job will be costing more than what you quoted for originally, especially in today's current volatile market, in which case we've recommended decreasing that delay before inflating the cost, and on things like materials, having a sharper increase than, say, the labor, plant, or subcontractor, as they're going to make much more of a difference. You can protect yourself with that. It allows you to then produce a quote that has the projected, say, increases included, and you can provide it to the customer. And then that way, then, if they agree with that quote, as you go forward, your price rises are hopefully covered to an extent so they sting less if they do rise sharply. If they do not rise, then you are then making money on those items after that period. Or if you're really savvy, you can then buy it all in bulk beforehand and not have to pay any extra anyway. But still, that there sits as a tool to help protect you if you want to use that feature. You can even produce 2 quotes, one without inflation and one with, saying this is the cost of the job if we start soon, this is the cost of the job projected if we start further down the line. And the customer can then see that there will be a massive increase, and if they do decide to go later, they're not going to get a horrible surprise. At least they'll be expecting the price increase. They should at least be looking at the market now currently and going, okay, prices are going up. Not many are actually that savvy to do so. And they're still complaining about prices of their extensions that their neighbor had done for 20 grand 10 years ago. So that there is that use of that tool. And finally, with this module, more of, say, a feature that is nice to have, as some people like to create jobs this way, is that groups of estimators, groups of estimating calculators. If you have any questions about, say, profit and such, please drop them into the question box. I'm more than happy to go through anything. In the meantime, I'm going to go through to have a little word about this section. If you feel this is not relevant to you, then say carry on, just start asking questions about anything else that you feel you want to cover or reiterate or revisit from this session. In the meantime, I'm just going to show you that the group of estimating calculators, as I think, and groups of estimating calculators. So in the groups of estimating calculators, if you used to start a job in the more old school sense of just going straight into the calculators, which is the 4th option on creating a new job, or using the template system at the beginning, with a template at the beginning, and you choose the group, so it adds them into the background ready. They are set so that you have, say, a apex roof extension. If I choose that one there, my list on the right-hand side basically has anything that will be encountered during an apex roof extension ticked in this section here. I click on the tick column and scroll to the top. You'll see all the items that it would normally bring in by default as a workbook or calculator ready for when you do an apex roof extension. You can then remove calculators that you're never going to use in an apex roof extension by default if you don't want them clogging up the background, just by unticking them from the list, and they get returned from whence they came. With that as well, you can add a group of estimating calculators based on the one that you've got open currently. If I go to renovation and go, I'll say add group, I can just add a group fresh, or I can copy an existing one and tweak that to be a bit more personalized. So my test one's going to be blank. I'll just go through and add the calculators that I want to start off with. Again, it's more of a legacy feature for those that want to estimate without the use of templates. Okay, so that's a very kind of quick section to look at and have a little look at. And that there is the end of content for Module 2. So if there's any questions you want to look at or ask about the specifications or the overhead, profit and inflation, please, I'm going to give you a few moments now to drop your questions into the question box. Okay, so not looking like much in the way of questions. I've either answered everything for you as we've gone along, or you've fallen asleep to my dulcet Bristolian tones. Again, it's the same message as Tuesday. If you think of anything that you want to know a little bit more about, you're more than welcome to give us a call on the support line at 0117 916 7899, or drop an email over to support@hbxl.co.uk. That'll land in our ticketing system, and myself, one of my colleagues, can pick that up and then get back to you as soon as we can. Handy thing is that you can even leave a offline chat message as well if it's after hours, or talk to us directly on chat during the day. So if you do leave a message offline, we'll try and get back to you that the next morning, or by the afternoon, depending on just quite how busy things are. So just to go through what we're going to be looking at on Tuesday next week, we'll actually be going into the calculators. We're going to be doing a bit of poking around the actual estimating some items, how to adjust the calculators as we go along. It's going to be a bit more of a longer session than it is today, because there's going to be a bit more to cover, but it's all grouped together under that kind of header there. It should be quite a good one. So yeah, if no one has any other questions, I'll end this session shortly. We've hit an hour today, so hopefully still got time to do something productive today. Check out, make sure everyone's still on site. They've not seen, he's on a webinar, he's not paying attention, let's go home early. Okay, so no final questions. I shall bid you all goodbye, and hopefully speak to you all next Tuesday. The recording of this session should be available in the next couple of days. Hopefully you should have already had the alert for the first session being available for you to view if you need to go through anything in that one again. Have a good day and goodbye.